Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, co-host of the weekly podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch every Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. All aboard for this spooky treat from 1972, Horror Express. This treat is something that people may think they know who made it. They may feel like it has all the hallmarks that would be in line with who they think produced the film, but they would actually be wrong. For the most part, the 60s were dominated in the UK by Hammer films, at least in the horror and sci-fi horror genres. However, they did have a rival of sorts, Amicus Productions. Often the two studios would share some of the same actors, in particular Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Interestingly, while Amicus would make other types of movies, their biggest successes, or at least the ones that people look back most fondly on, are their anthology or portmanteau horror films like Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, and The Beast Must Die. That last one was one previously covered on Monster Mondays. And also, as a side note, a couple of weeks ago I talked about Doctor Who. Amicus made two Doctor Who films starring his dastardly foes, the Daleks, and starred Peter Cushing as the Doctor. These are okay, but proved that a bigger budget and slightly more mainstream approach, I guess, to the character and the concepts within did not play as well as the much more, I would say, niche television series. Another film I've talked about on this show that starred Peter Cushing as well was The Uncanny. Now, this was an anthology like Amicus made, but actually not released by Amicus, but was co-produced by Milton Subotsky, who was part of Amicus. But I digress. Considering Horror Express as a sci-fi horror film of the early 70s, had a high production value, and also starred Lee and Cushing, this film was not made by either Hammer or Amicus. Instead, this was actually a Spanish-British co-production between Spain's Granada Films and England's Benmar Productions. It doesn't really stop there. While I think this movie is extremely well made, it was actually made on a very low budget. The cost of this film was reportedly around $300,000, and being able to make the movie more efficiently and scoring Lee, Cushing, and Telly Savalas, these were all huge parts of how successful the movie would be and how it would build a legacy over these last 50 years. Telly Savalas, who had already been quite a star himself, I've not really talked about him much on this show before, but he was a Best Supporting Actor Oscar nominee in 1962 for Birdman of Alcatraz. He also played Pontius Pilate in The Greatest Story Ever Told, and he had been in episodes of very successful TV shows like The Twilight Zone, The Untouchables, The Fugitive, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and Bonanza, among many, many more. He was also 1 year away from his most popular and recognizable role by far as Kojak. Now, what I know him even more as was he was one of the several actors who played Blofeld in a James Bond movie. In particular, the highly underrated On Her Majesty's Secret Service from 1969. Savalas landed in this part as a fairly memorable character because he was currently under contract with director Eugenio Martin. Both men worked previously on another 1972 film about Pancho Villa, whom Savalas played the title role. And Savalas would be able to fulfill a contract obligation by playing a supporting part in this film, and the film could have a third major name in the credits. Now, there is a bit of a conflicting story around how this movie came to be. Martin says it happened because a producer obtained the train set after filming completed on the Epic the year before, Nicholas and Alexandra. But the train sets may have also come from Dr. Zhivago. Whatever it was apparently something Russian, which does play into this movie. However, co-producer Bernard Gordon totally refutes that. He said that the sets were built for Pancho Villa, which would make sense, as that was Martin's film too. The scenes for each train car scene in this film were shot in consecutive order, where the single car that they had could be redressed to save space. And another bit of interesting info about this production, the film was shot without sound. Lee, Cushing, and Savalas would still lend their voices for the English dubs in places like the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. But this was not an uncommon practice. This film was made to be exported all over Europe, so a lot of these movies like that would be shot without sound, so dialogue could be dubbed in wherever it would ultimately play. Sadly, Cushing had arrived in Madrid to begin filming this pretty close to, shortly after, I should say, his wife's death. He was still pretty distraught over losing her. They had been married for 28 years. However, it was said that Christopher Lee came to his friend's aid and convinced him to stay due to their long-standing working relationship together. In the end, the film would go on to be very well liked. A lot of this is due to the three major stars in the movie, and an engaging script, and Martine's direction. Martine was surprised about how well Horror Express performed, especially in English-speaking countries. Part of that surprise was because, while it did do well with critics and audiences wherever it played, the movie did very, very little to impact his career. In fact, I think you can say that he did more before this film than what he did after it. Now, the movie opens with Lee's Sir Alexander Saxton sending a letter recounting a doomed expedition in 1906. This expedition uncovered the frozen humanoid remains in a cave in Manchuria. He has it stored in a crate, and it will be transported back to Europe via rail through China and Russia. Before boarding the train, he is greeted by a rival and colleague at the Geological Society named Dr. Wells, played by Cushing. Wells is traveling separately with his assistant. Outside, a thief is poking around the crate that belongs to Saxton, and he's found dead with his eyes totally white. A Russian monk, who's also traveling on this train, believes that the thief was killed by something evil from inside that crate. Now, the train departs for Moscow. Another passenger is a Polish countess named Irina and her little poodle. The dog is highly agitated when in the baggage car with Saxton's crate. With his curiosity kind of growing over this, Dr. Wells pays the luggage porter to drill a hole into Saxton's crate and, hey, check out what's inside. He's a little curious. The porter peeks inside by removing the screws holding the crate together, and this allows the thawed-out specimen inside the crate to escape. It kills the porter by using its glowing red eyes to turn the porter's eyes white, like the thief's was. Then the specimen breaks out and begins whistling the same tune that the porter was whistling earlier. As the specimen begins to roam freely through the train's cars, the Countess's dog begins whining and yelping. The monk, who prayed over the dead thief earlier, is traveling with the Countess and her husband, the Count. He starts up again with the accusation that there's something evil on board this train. And with the porter now missing and the dead guy on the train platform, Inspector Mirov, who is actually played by the actor Julio Pena, but for the English versions is actually dubbed by none other than Roger Delgado, who was making himself known to viewers as the Master on Doctor Who. That was something we talked about just a couple of weeks ago too. So he insists that Saxton opened the crate, and they find the missing porter in pretty ghastly shape. And Dr. Wells, who had confessed to paying the man to open the crate earlier, asks what was inside. And Saxton says that it was a half-man, half-ape who lived about 2 million years ago. And Saxton believes that the creature is somehow still alive. While Wells finds that kind of preposterous, he doesn't really have any other explanation. Mirov wants Saxton kept under lock and key and his men to quietly search the cars for whoever might have killed the porter. One of the soldiers searching the cars ends up dead, and Wells is ultimately called to perform an autopsy on the porter. He discovers that the man's brain has been rendered smooth with none of the normal wrinkles that a brain normally has. As he leaves, the specimen returns to the baggage car to hide. Now, while this was all going on, this mysterious red-headed woman who kind of charmed her way into Dr. Wells's room is sneaking around while everybody is preparing for bed, and she seems to be there to kind of steal something from the Countess. As she obtains whatever it was that she was supposed to be stealing, she is attacked by the creature and is killed. Wells goes looking for her and is attacked by the creature as well, who ultimately is shot by Mirov and seemingly killed. Mirov is nearly killed by the creature himself. However, there's something more going on with the good inspector than the rest of us know. The woman who was with Wells before being killed was actually a spy. She was trying to steal a sample of a new metal that the Count possessed. Later, Saxton and Wells have deduced that the creature was able to pull knowledge from his victims through their eyes. That's what makes their brains smooth. It's literally sucking memories out of their brains through their eyeballs. When they pull fluid from the eyes of the dead creature, they see images in the fluid. And they see the inspector, which was the last thing the creature saw before dying. They see dinosaurs. They even see a picture of the Earth. And the idea is that a couple of million years ago, an alien life form came to Earth and started assimilating information from what it saw there, and in particular from the animals. It was also able to pass itself over to other living things, and that's how it was able to survive. Or at least that's their suspicion on how all of this works. Now, as the two scientists are discovering more about the creature, we are learning that the creature is actually still living. The creature has transferred itself over to the inspector. This agitates the monk traveling with the Count and Countess, and he starts taking a real shine to the possibility of serving this creature, believing it to be some kind of higher power, although he becomes somewhat more obsessed with the idea of Satan being this creature. Now, he takes the eye from the scientist in order to return it to the creature, and Saxton and Wells are told by Mirov that there has been another killing. This time, it's Wells' assistant, Miss Jones. And he knows that the Wells, Saxton, and the Countess have all been given the knowledge by what they saw in the creature's memories from his eye fluid. Info about the murders have been telegraphed ahead to the authorities, and Captain Kazan, who's played by Telly Savalas, who's also a pretty crazy Cossack officer, prepares his men to board the train. And when they come aboard, Kazan quickly takes control of the train, arresting everyone except for the Count and Countess. When Wells and Saxton even speak up, saying that, what's with this crazy Kazan guy, and thinking that there's some sort of foreign influence that's causing all sorts of trouble on the train, they are kind of roughed up a little bit to shut them up. Now, Kazan is a hard-drinking, hard-smoking, cruel, power-mad, and terribly xenophobic person. When confronted by the monk, Kazan actually whips him unconscious to show that he's not messing around. He also knows that the inspector was the one that the monk was trying to protect. So while Kazan questions Mirov, Saxton turns down the lights in the car and reveals that Mirov is the creature. And Kazan throws a knife into the back of Mirov, and the monk asks for the creature to transport his essence into him, and Mirov decides to do this before he dies. The monk then breaks the power to the lights in the train car so that he can basically roam free and kill just about everyone very quickly. Wells and Saxton has the passengers retreat to the baggage car, where the monk wipes out Kazan's men, and also the crazy captain as well. But Kazan is kind of a badass, and he puts up a hell of a fight before finally succumbing to the creature. Now, while the passengers are barricaded into the baggage car, Wells looks after them while Saxton hunts the creature. The creature kills the Count, and before he can kill the Countess, Saxton stops him. The creature explains that he came here from another galaxy and was left behind by accident, and he survived by jumping from protozoa to fish to other animals and so forth. He argues for his life, saying that he could help teach the world how to stop disease and all sorts of other scientific advancement. But he also demonstrates how he can resurrect the ones that he's killed into basically his zombies by more or less it's kind of splitting his consciousness almost. He uses that to escape Saxton and forcing the Countess and Saxton to flee, and they fight through the zombified soldiers that Kazan brought to get to the baggage car. Wells and Saxton separate the baggage car from the rest of the train while Moscow orders the train to be derailed off the cliff to its destruction with all the creature's zombies aboard. So let's get to the 3 things I like about Horror Express. First, as I said, this was made on a shoestring budget, but it is very well made. We have costumes that I have to assume were on loan from another production. We have lots of speaking parts and several featured extras, but it might be low budget. It still looks really lush and like it was kind of expensive. Let's not forget that there are effects in this too, with makeup and creature effects, and it's just all very well done. There are people bleeding from their eyes, having their eyes go white, their heads are cut open in autopsies, and their brains are revealed to be smooth, and the creature's red, kind of glowing eyes. These are all really good practical effects and makeup jobs done for a movie made on a very small budget in 1972. I'd go so far as to say that this is a first-rate creature chiller in the age of pretty shoddy European movies trying to keep pace with American and British productions. Even some of the best European horror films of the time still had some not-so-great effects that had quality kind of overlooked for the gross-out factor instead. And Horror Express cuts back on gross and turns up the effectiveness. Plus, I love the cramped and contained setting of a train that is traveling across Asia, and that just adds to that effective claustrophobia and building tension. Second, I really do like the creature in this. I mentioned there were creature effects in this, and that it's easy to mostly call out the glowing eyes and stuff, but there is a little bit more to the monster than those red glowing eyes. He's also a prehistoric ape man, and that is, set up to be kind of a missing link of sorts. And that's what Christopher Lee was looking for on his expedition. And that's what he found. But he just didn't expect the thing to still be alive. So we see the gnarly face, we see a hairy arm, and that's something that also transfers over to Inspector Mirov. That makes the creature kind of visibly interesting. However, the concept of the creature is even more interesting and kind of clever. It would be easy just to make this some sort of unknown monster that no one knew about except for some old Russian fable or something. No, this is actually an alien from a different galaxy that retains information and memories by sucking it out of others, forcing their brains to go smooth, and then that information is imprinted on the creature's eye juice. That's really freaking clever. Moreover, this is another ancient alien deal. He came here with his people, and oops, he got left behind. Then he jumped from creature to creature and basically cataloged a bunch of Earth history. I really got to give it up to whoever came up with that concept for this monster movie. It might have been director Martin, who is credited for the story, but he may have gotten it from somebody else too. But that's really a great way to stretch a low budget. And they do it in the most organic way possible by having a really fascinating monster and story behind that monster. Thirdly, I have to say that when Telly Savalas shows up, this movie goes into another level. Savalas plays his Kazan character like a total madman. He's really only in 2 scenes, but whoa, does he chew up those 2 scenes. He is so overpowering and crazy. The combined powers of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing are almost rendered useless in their one scene together. We first see Kazan after he's apparently banged some girl right there in the train station, and the next time we see him, he's going on and on about outside influences that are creating crime in Russia. Then he holds out the longest against the monster than anyone else in the movie. He's loud, he's abrasive, and he commands both of his scenes that he's in like no one else in this movie could. So bravo, Telly. Who loves you, baby? I do in this movie. So that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday at filmseizure.com. And don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure Podcast and Monster Mondays at your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieanima.com, to read new articles each and every Friday morning. Next week, we have another alien creature making an appearance on Monster Mondays. I'll be traveling back to the slacker days of the late 70s and take aim at Laser Blast. So until next week, stay spooky.